Hi guys, so it looks like Boris Johnson will eventually go and meet with Ursula von der Leyen, the President of the European Commission, in Brussels this week. Now this follows negotiations that took place between the two leaders during the weekend and on Monday, but nothing substantial came out of those talks. So what are they going to talk about when they meet this week? Well, the first topic of discussion is, of course, fisheries. Now the EU wants to continue to maximise access to UK fishing waters for its fleets after the 31st of December this year. Of course, the British argued that the UK is now an independent state and should be able to prioritise its own fishing boats. However, as I've said before, most fish caught by British fishermen is actually sold in Europe, and Britain needs access to EU markets following the end of the transition period. Now, I uploaded a video on Monday morning talking about a massive breakthrough that took place, and that did actually happen, but unfortunately it was scuttled at the last moment by Sir David Frost, who is the UK chief negotiator. He allegedly wanted to add new rules for EU fishing boats accessing UK waters, which was something that wasn't talked about before. Now, in an attempt to break somewhat of the impasse, UK negotiators have been proposing removing fish like mackerel and whiting from any aspect of the negotiations. Those types of fish would be instead negotiated separately on a rolling annual basis with the EU and other countries such as Russia, Iceland and Norway. Now, breaking the trade deal down into smaller parts may help get both sides over the line, but of course the other side of that is it creates a more complicated trade deal, and it runs the risk of creating new trade deals later on that could run into conflict with the one that's been negotiated at the moment. Now, likely the second issue that they're going to talk about is, of course, the level playing field. Now, of course, the level playing field is intended to ensure that businesses on one side do not gain an advantage, an unfair advantage, over those on the other side. So, in return for continuing access to the single market, the EU will seek a high-level degree of alignment with the UK on standards such as workers' rights, the environment, and in particular, of course, state aid going to businesses. Now, the UK has said it would promise not to undercut EU measures, but they say that they should be able to set their own standards. Now, Boris Johnson is asking people to trust him. Would you trust him? I don't think so. So why should the EU trust him? We have to remember that the whole issue of state aid rules was actually something brought in by the UK government when it was a member of the European Union. I think the level playing field and state aid rules will probably be the most difficult aspect of any agreement between Boris Johnson and Ursula von der Leyen. Now, finally, of course, there is governance, how all of this is going to be monitored and controlled. Now, the two sides, of course, the European Union and the UK, are still at odds over how the mechanisms for enforcing any agreement and resolving disputes will operate. Now, Ursula von der Leyen recently was quoted as saying, "Trust is good, but law is better." Now, at the same time, the British government has been adamant that the UK is an independent sovereign state and cannot accept the jurisdiction of the European Court of Justice. So where does this leave us? I think the fundamental issue here is trust. The EU no longer trust Boris Johnson and his government. They certainly don't trust them after they admitted that they were willing to break international law. Now, it seems that those very aspects of the internal market bill that run into conflict with the Northern Ireland Protocol, which were breaking international law, are about to be dropped by Boris Johnson in an offer to help facilitate the negotiations a bit further. Now, of course, these were never necessary for the British government to put in place in the first place, but they decided to drop them at the last minute. So kudos to Boris Johnson for not breaking international law. Okay. Now, this all seems to be going in a very positive direction. Boris Johnson has spoken to Ursula von der Leyen. He's actually going to meet her in person this week to hammer out something perhaps, but probably not, because it seems that both the Irish Foreign Minister Simon Coveney and the EU Chief Negotiator Michel Barnier are considerably downbeat when it comes to the prospect of a deal being hammered out at the last minute. So, if Boris Johnson truly wants a trade deal with the European Union, he really needs to negotiate something this week. As I've said before, there's a possibility that he could get something. He will return to Parliament with a deal in his hand and claim some sort of victory over the European Union. There's also the possibility that he will listen to the ERG, the hardline Brexiteers, and claim that no deal was possible. And then disaster will strike and he will start blaming other people. Let me know in the comment section, guys, what you think. As always, your comments are greatly appreciated. Thanks a lot.